The air smelled of dust and betrayal. I sat beneath the guava tree in front of what used to be my home, barefoot and quiet. The cold cement wall now bore the bold red writing of private property and no trespassing, as if I were a stranger to the very place my son once called his dream. A place built with sweat, love, and the last savings we scraped together. I blinked slowly, my eyes too dry for more tears. That house, that big, beautiful house with the rosewood doors and tiled roofing, stood there, shining in the morning sun like it had a soul. My son, Femi, had built it with his wife, Lola, shortly after returning from South Africa. He had made promises to both of us, his mother and his bride, that we'd live in peace. That this home would be big enough for all our dreams. But dreams, like houses, can crumble, and betrayal often wears the mask of a smile. It started small. Lola had always been polite at first. She greeted me with respect, called me Mama Femi, and even prepared my favorite vegetable soup. But slowly, after the wedding, that warmth turned cold. At first, it was the small things, rolling her eyes when I corrected her on the way she folded clothes, snide comments when I offered advice about running the household, whispers over the phone that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. Still, I held my peace. After all, I was the mother-in-law. I knew my place, or at least I thought I did. But the tipping point came after Femi got promoted. He began traveling more frequently, leaving Lola and me under one roof for longer periods. And that's when the real war began. One evening, after a heated exchange about a burnt pot of rice, Lola stood in front of me and said the words I'll never forget, "This is not your house. You're just an old woman clinging to relevance." I sat stunned, the wind knocked out of me. Before I could speak, she stormed into her bedroom and slammed the door. That night, I cried like a child. Not for the rice, not even for the insult, but for the quiet erosion of the family I once held together. Femi came home 3 days later. I told him everything. But instead of standing by me, he sighed and said, "Mama, please. Just manage. She's trying." Trying? She had now moved my room to the back of the house, next to the store. A room with no fan, where rats squeaked at night and geckos crawled over the wall. Still, I managed. Until the day she brought her sister to stay. Ruth. Loud, brash, and always gossiping. Together, they made life unbearable. They changed the locks on the front door. They moved the family portraits, including my husband's, from the wall. I was now a ghost living among enemies. And then, the unimaginable happened. Femi was in Rwanda for a conference. Lola approached me, arms folded. "You have 1 week," she said calmly, "to pack your things and leave. This is a home for our nuclear family, not a retirement shelter." I asked her where I was supposed to go. She simply shrugged and walked away. I begged her. I even knelt. But her heart was colder than the marble floor tiles she loved to polish every morning. A week later, my things were packed and left at the gate. I had no phone, no bank account. Just an old wrapper, a bag of dried fish, and my tears. I slept outside a church for 2 nights before a kind woman, Mama Nkechi, took me in temporarily. She gave me food, listened to my story, and said something that stirred a fire in my chest. "Don't let injustice win just because you're tired." And that was when I remembered the land. You see, when Femi was a young man, I sold a portion of my late husband's farm to pay for his education. I gave him everything, but kept 1 plot for myself, 5 plots, actually. Located on the corner of Adibeo Crescent, it was undeveloped for years, until Lola opened her boutique there. She named it Lush by Lola. And it flourished, customers, influencers, online orders, it became the talk of the town. What she didn't know was that the land still belonged to me. We never transferred ownership, and the only reason I hadn't demanded rent was because, she was family. Or so I thought. But family doesn't throw you out like expired milk. I quietly returned to my small plot one afternoon, with Mama Nkechi's help, and sat before the boutique. I looked at the modern glass windows, the spinning mannequin in the display, and the LED sign that blinked her name in pink. I had built nothing with these hands, but I owned the ground beneath it. So, I called a lawyer. His name was Mr. Ojo, sharp-eyed, middle-aged, and ruthless in court. After showing him the deed, he smiled and said, "Mama, this is solid. You have every right." Within weeks, Lola received a formal eviction notice. At first, she laughed. Then she screamed. Then she cried. She called Femi, who called me. "Mama," he pleaded, "don't do this. It's too much. You're bigger than this." "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm exactly the right size for this." The boutique had 2 months to vacate. Customers began to dwindle. Rumors spread like wildfire. I didn't speak to anyone. I simply waited. On the final day of the deadline, Lola stood before me, her makeup smudged from tears, her pride deflated. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't know. I was angry, and I took it out on you." "I know," I said. "But anger doesn't excuse cruelty." She looked down, humiliated. For the first time, I saw the little girl behind the pride. Not a villain, just a broken person who chose the wrong weapons. Still, pain teaches lessons peace cannot. Femi showed up that evening, silent and ashamed. He hugged me without a word. I wept again, but this time not out of sorrow, but release. They moved the boutique to another area. I didn't charge rent. But I didn't give the land back either. I used part of it to build a small home for widows, women like me who had been cast aside like forgotten clothes. We named it Mama's Place. A safe haven. A quiet revolution. Because sometimes, the land doesn't just hold buildings. It holds justice. Weeks passed after the eviction, then peace settled over me like an old shawl. Not the kind of peace that comes from revenge, but the kind that comes from reclaiming your dignity. Mama's Place began to take shape with the help of 2 widows I met at the church, Auntie Ronk, whose children had abandoned her, and Aya Sala, who had lost everything in a fire. With modest resources and some help from a local carpenter, we built a simple 2-room shelter with open arms and a locked gate, safe, but welcoming. Word spread quickly in the community. People began to see me differently, not as the old woman who was thrown out, but as the woman who stood back up. Some praised me, others whispered behind closed doors. But one thing was clear, the silence between Lola and me remained like a closed wound that refused to scab. Until one Friday morning, as I swept the front of Mama's Place, I heard a car door slam. It was Lola. She wasn't wearing her usual heels. She looked tired. Older. Her boutique had reopened in a less prime area, but the shine had faded. She walked toward me, carefully, as if not to crush the gravel beneath her sandals. "I came to ask if I can talk to you," she said. I hesitated, then nodded slowly. We sat on a wooden bench beneath the mango tree, the same place my late husband and I used to share roasted maize and palm wine. The breeze carried the scent of soil and dry leaves. "I was angry when you evicted us," she started, eyes on the ground. "But now I understand. I never saw you as part of this family. I saw you as competition." That admission landed heavily between us. It hurt, but it was honest. "I thought I needed space from you to build my own life," she continued. "But I realize now I stepped on the very foundation that raised the man I married." I stayed quiet. She reached into her bag and pulled out a brown envelope. "I know it's not enough, but it's the first rent I should have paid you years ago." I took the envelope, not for the money, but for what it symbolized, acknowledgement. Lola, I said, my voice calm, family isn't built on convenience. It's built on respect. I never asked for much, only to be seen. Heard. Treated like I mattered. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, Mama. I believed her. I didn't forget, but I forgave. As she stood to leave, she looked around the small compound of Mama's place. You turned this pain into purpose, she said. I smiled. Sometimes God takes us through fire to show others how not to get burned. She nodded. Can I come visit again? You're always welcome, I replied. But this time, through the front door. 3 months later, Mama's place had grown, not just in size, but in spirit. The 2 rooms had become 4. A local youth group volunteered every Saturday, helping plant vegetables and repaint the walls. Widows came and went, some stayed for weeks, others for days, but every woman left with a renewed sense of purpose. What had started as a refuge was now a movement. One afternoon, I sat in the shade with a cup of warm zobo when Femi arrived. He wore jeans and a polo shirt, but his face carried the weight of unspoken guilt. He sat beside me, silence stretching between us like a frayed cloth. I failed you, he said eventually. I didn't reply. I let the breeze do the talking. I should have stood up when it mattered, he continued. You raised me better than that. But I chose peace over justice, and I see now, peace built on injustice is no peace at all. I reached over and touched his hand, aged but strong. It's never too late to do right, I said. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought so you'd remember who you came from. Femi nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I want to help you grow this place, Mama. Whatever it takes. We spent the evening making plans, expanding the shelter, starting a small skills program for elderly women, even offering literacy classes for those who never had the chance to attend school. He promised to bring in sponsors and NGOs, not just for me, but for the countless forgotten women this land now served. And Lola. She returned too, this time not as a boutique owner, but as a volunteer. She started offering freestyling classes to widows who wanted to rebuild their lives. It was her way of healing, of turning shame into service. One day, she pulled me aside. I used to think power came from possession, from things. But now I know it comes from the people we lift. I smiled, heartful. And from the ones we don't knock down. As months turned into a year, Mama's place transformed into something sacred. A symbol that no one, no matter how old, broken, or betrayed, deserved to be discarded. People often ask me how I managed to forgive. I tell them, because bitterness only makes you its prisoner, while justice sets you free. In the end, I didn't just take back the land. I took back my voice. I reclaimed my worth. And I planted something deeper than business or buildings, a legacy. Because in the soil of pain, something beautiful can grow if you're willing to water it with truth.